ESO's update 46 just hit the public test server, and with this coming update, heavy attack builds are actually looking pretty strong. We've got a brand new Mythic item specifically for heavy attack builds coming in that next patch, plus the possibilities now with subclassing to customize your build even further by mixing and matching skills from other classes. In this video, we'll dive into exactly what this means for you heavy attack enthusiasts out there, so let's jump right into it. Now, of course, no heavy attack video for ESO would be complete without first talking a little bit about the Oaken Soul Ring, which I think still serves a purpose for a lot of players, even with this new Mythic. That's because Oaken Soul gives you tons of buffs that you normally need, but built into the Mythic itself. Now, obviously, you're also limited to one skill bar using the Oaken Soul Ring, but many players prefer a one-bar playstyle anyway, so that's not really a problem. And what makes Oaken Soul particularly good for heavy attack builds is it includes all the buffs that you need, plus more, making your limited one-bar batch of skills completely workable. For example, you get Major Brutality and Sorcery for damage, you get Major Savagery and Prophecy for critical chance, you get Major Resolve for your armor buff, and of course you get the best buff of all for heavy attack builds, Empower, which increases the damage of your heavy attacks substantially. Now we'll talk more about Empower in a minute because you will need a consistent source of this buff if you plan on switching over to this new Mythic item for heavy attacks. But with Oaken Soul and the right build, it's not uncommon to be able to obtain 90 plus K DPS, like this Oaken Soul Heavy Attack Sorc build, which I've been testing on the PTS. Just for comparison, that's without any trials gear or monster sets, and again, you don't even have to buff, bar swap, or use potions on this build, so that's just crazy good, considering basically anybody could do this. With this new Mythic item called Rakkhat's Voidmantle, as I said, we now have the option to push our heavy attack damage even higher. Currently on the PTS, this item is providing an additional 50% bonus to heavy attacks, but with the downside of heavy attacks no longer restoring resources. You also get bonus resource restored when light attacking, but generally you'll just be heavy attacking with this if you want to maximize your damage. Now, just speaking in terms of raw damage, in its current state, this will definitely outperform Oaken Soul for many situations. Now, yes, it will be more challenging to use because you'll be missing lots of buffs that Oaken Soul normally provides, but there's obviously ways around that. Basic spell power potions, for example, will give you Major Sorcery and Prophecy for that extra damage and crit chance. And if you have access to scribing, you can set up Ulfsil's Contingency to give you Minor Force, and it also procs Empower automatically for 10 seconds due to it already being a Mage's Guild skill. Remember, you do need Empower on a heavy attack build, and any Mage's Guild skill can provide that passively. But that said, you'll still be missing some powerful buffs that Oaken Soul provides, like Minor Slayer and Aegis, Minor Heroism, Minor Berserk, and so on, but the extra damage you can get from running this medium armor shoulder piece is going to surpass the deficit for most players if you can manage sourcing those buffs for yourself. But with this new Mythic, you'll also need to account for your heavy attacks no longer restoring resources, which is a big deal, and also one of the reasons why heavy attack builds are so good, especially for solo content, is you can have basically infinite sustain. And I didn't have too much trouble adjusting for this, at least while testing on the trial dummy on the PTS. All I needed to do was switch out to a food with some Magicka recovery, and that seemed to do the trick just fine. But I could see where this could be pretty punishing in more challenging solo scenarios. But as you can see here, running essentially the same build, which is just Sergeant's Mail and Highland Sentinel with one-piece Slime Craw, I saw a jump of over 10k DPS just by switching Mythics from Oaken Soul to Rakkhat's Mantle. Pretty nice. Though to be clear, I think this kind of jump will only be seen at the very top end and parsing under, best case scenarios. You can obviously optimize on the trial dummy for even higher DPS, which does look impressive on paper, but it's important to consider context, I think, in cases like this, because with less optimized groups or without trial dummy buffs, which raises everything to the highest possible level, the difference between these two Mythics is going to shrink due to how many buffs Oaken Soul provides that you'll still be missing out on. But I think the new Mythic is a nice trade-off for players looking to branch out with their build and do even more damage if they're willing to maintain more buffs and are up for a bit more challenge in their rotation. If the devs are planning on making this a stepping stone between Oaken Soul on the easier end of builds, Rakkhat's Mantle in the middle, and then something, with trials gear and a monster set on the top end, I think this new Mythic does a good job of bridging that gap. But an even bigger potential buff for heavy attack and one-bar builds, in my opinion, is going to be the new subclassing system, also coming to ESO in Update 46. Basically, this new system lets you swap out 1 or 2 class skill lines and grab a skill line from any other class to replace those with. This includes all standard abilities, passive skills, and the ultimate from that new skill line. So everything comes with that, and there's no downgrading or nerfing of power. It's the same as the original class skill line. So there's definitely going to be a lot to consider there, which has been really fun so far in my own testing on the PTS. But for example, on this basic heavy attack sorcerer, for my initial test this week, I am essentially just using one skill line from the sorcerer class. That's Daedric Summoning. That means I can swap out my other 2 sorcerer skill lines for something else that might be better for a heavy attack build. Some skill lines that came to mind right away were Gravelord from the Necromancer class due to their passive buff for damage over time, and then Assassination from the Nightblade class for those passives and some skills like Relentless Focus. Again, you'll gain access to all the skills, all the passives, and even the ultimate from those skill lines, but you're also losing your own, which is something you'll need to consider as well. For example, I didn't realize how much damage was coming from the Sorcerer's Stormcalling skill line for heavy attack builds until I actually got rid of it. I mean, first you have Capacitor, which is going to help your recovery when using the Mythic Shoulder, and then you have Energized for 5% bonus shock damage, Amplitude for 10% scaling damage based on enemy health, and also the Expert Mage passive, which now grants bonus weapon and spell damage based on your sorcerer skills slotted. So even though I didn't lose any actual skills from Stormcalling because I wasn't using any, losing just those 4 passives brought my build down quite a bit. It was actually noticeable. So ultimately for this test, I decided to keep the Stormcalling skill line as well on my sorcerer just to make things easy. That also gives us the option of running Overload, which is even stronger now for heavy attack builds, or something like Critical Surge for some passive healing if I needed it for actual content. Now that said, I think one of the most popular skill lines for subclassing is definitely going to be the Nightblade's Assassination skill line, especially with the buffs it's getting in Update 46. Assassination offers some skills which give you nice bonuses without having to be cast, which is actually perfect for heavy attack and 1-bar builds, because you can simply slot them on your front or your back bar and get the bonus, plus the assassination passives themselves are also quite strong. For example, Relentless Focus you can run on either your front or your back bar for up to 600 bonus weapon and spell damage now, which I used here just for the buff, but also for the passive of slotting 1 assassination skill. You could also backbar Concealed Weapon for a passive Minor Expedition, which is very nice in terms of extra mobility. And then in terms of passive skills, you can now get almost 9% critical chance from the Master Assassin passive when you flank a target. You get tons of sustain from the Executioner passive, even more critical chance from pressure points, and a bonus 10% crit damage from the Hemorrhage passive. So yeah, this skill line is going to be great for any build, not just heavy attack builds. Again, I didn't actually cast any of these skills, I just had them slotted passively for the bonuses, as I was basically trying to recreate a 1-bar playstyle here. You can certainly get more DPS by slotting the Nightblade's Execute Killer's Blade on your front bar instead of just leaving Relentless here like I did. That's another option because you can actually have Relentless Focus passively active on the back bar and still get the bonus. And I also had Bound Aegis backbarred for the bonus Max Magicka and Minor Resolve and Minor Protection, which is another really nice bonus and a really good reason to stick with Sorcerer for your heavy attack build. But with subclassing now, you can see we can open up the back bar to even more passive skills from other classes, which is going to add even more power to a heavy attack build itself, while also still replicating a 1-bar build if that's the style that you like. And like I said earlier, maybe you could just slot 1 or 2 long-lasting buffs like Critical Surge on the back bar to slowly expand out your build, which you can't do, obviously, with using the Oaken Soul Ring. I mean, maybe we'll have a new 1.5 bar build become more popular with this upcoming patch, who knows? But yeah, more options is always a good thing in my opinion, and I'm glad heavy attack and 1-bar builds now have a new Mythic option moving forward, as long as Rakkhat's Mantle can survive the PTS without nerfs. I do think it's in a good spot right now, and I hope it stays there. You guys can actually use this when it goes live, but let me know what you think down in the comments below. Are you looking forward to using this new Mythic, or do you think it's too powerful? And before we go, with so much ESO news dropping lately, I have decided to grab the weekly highlights and things that I maybe missed in my videos and put them together into a free weekly newsletter. For example, I completely missed the changes to champion points in my PTS review this week, so I added those to the newsletter, as well as a link to an awesome developer interview I found, even more details on subclassing, and a quick breakdown of the class balance changes from week 1 PTS in case you didn't have time to watch the full video. Like I said, this is completely free, and you can grab the link down below if you're interested. But as always, I hope you're doing well, stay safe out there, and I will see you around in the next video.